everybody, and welcome back to the channel. In today's video, I want to help you prepare for your iOS interviews. So I want to show you a bunch of resources that I used while I was going through my interviews. I think in the past year, I've gone through about a dozen interviews with companies, so I feel like this is a topic that I can speak to pretty well, give you some advice from my own experiences and the things that I use to prepare. So if we start looking, the very first thing I would recommend you look at is this article from Ray Wenderlich. I'll be sure to leave links to everything that I talk about in the description below, so don't worry about having to type that out. This first one is the Navigating the iOS Interview. So this article really is just kind of a high level. As it says, this article gives best advice, tools, interview questions to prep for a successful iOS interview process. So highly recommend you go through and read it. You can see the table of contents over here, a whole bunch of different stuff. So understanding what the interview's actually going to be like. Is it a practical interview? Is it computer science? Is it more iOS focused? And then actually understanding, some real practical challenges, some resources, learning CS fundamentals. So they give links to a whole bunch of stuff that you can use and learn more about all of these different topics. Highly recommend you go through, even if you don't get any of their books or look at the other resources, can kind of give you an overview of things to expect as you're going through interview process. You can be sure if you're going through interviews, you're at least going to have an interview with a recruiter. So that's a basic, just get to know you. What's your experience? Do you understand the job description? And are you actually excited about joining the company? Then you'll typically have maybe a less technical interview with maybe a few team members. You won't write any code, but it'll be more iOS specific. So they could ask specific questions like, what is an optional? How do you deal with optionals? Do you have a favorite framework and why? How do you handle layout in iOS? So you can talk about things like auto layout or how you would do it in SwiftUI, those kind of questions. Then for sure, you'll have some kind of technical interview. So are you actually going to be coding a real app? You could also have this kind of CS fundamental interview. When I was going through interviews more recently, I saw this was becoming less and less common for iOS positions. Typically, I wouldn't have a CS interview. It was all focused on actual iOS concepts. So could you build an app? Did you actually understand how to make a network call, how to create a table view or a list if you're on SwiftUI and present information from an API? So it's going to depend on the company, but you can be sure you're at least going to have an iOS technical interview. And then finally, you'll typically have an interview with a manager, and that will just be for the manager to gauge whether or not he or she wants to bring you onto the team. So that's kind of your typical structure for it. Again, go through this guide. They give a lot of information and valuable resources. The next thing I really like is on Hacking with Swift, the Swift Career Guide. So Paul Hudson's put together a whole bunch of stuff that you can use to help prepare. So you can see skill review, coding test, interview questions, and then overall career advice. So if you want to look at things like the tests, you can see, test your Swift. So you can be the compiler, spot errors, rearrange lines to make code work. It is possible that you get an interview where they already have a full code base for you, and you're just going and hunting through and trying to fix errors. So that could be your technical iOS screen versus building something from scratch. So check these things out. You can see if you click on a test, you can just see, what's the error here. You can click one of the lines, whatever it is, and then submit what you think is wrong. Next, also from Paul Hudson, is the iOS interview questions. So Paul goes into a whole bunch of different topics. So you can see things like accessibility. So what's experience with VoiceOver? Can you explain dynamic type? And these questions are going to range from, easy being green, medium being yellow, and then hard questions being red. So if you can go through and understand all of the easy questions and then some of the medium questions, you'll be good if you're going for your first iOS job. You'll be able to nail those concepts pretty well. Next, this is probably my favorite resource. This is a book from Alex Bush, and it's called the iOS Interview Guide. This is one of the most in-depth tools I've found to actually prepare for interviews. So if you see here, we can click on the link to see the table of contents. and you can see everything that Alex goes through. What is the actual interview process like? What are all the fundamental things you need to learn? So like let, var, and Swift, MVC, singletons, everything with networking. How can you store data? Working with UI layouts. There's a whole bunch of stuff in here, and it's a really great resource. It isn't free like the other resources I've shown. So it is $39 that you can get from Gumroad, but if you can, highly recommend it. It is a great resource. And finally, this is Sean Allen's interview series. So he put up a video back in 2017 of the interview questions and answers that he received while he was going through interviews. And he has a whole playlist of more in-depth information for each of the questions. So looking at things like bounds versus frame, concurrency, and threading. So highly recommend watch the overview video that he did. And then if there's a particular topic that you're a little fuzzy on, be sure to watch the more in-depth video. It's a great resource, and the questions are still very relevant to today. So thank you, everybody. If you like this video, please be sure to leave it a like and subscribe. I really appreciate it, and it helps me out. Thanks, everyone. Catch you in the next one.